It was just an ordinary day at the local grocery store in a small neighborhood of Ohio, where life was slow and routines went largely unchallenged. People pushed their carts through the aisles, some lost in thought, others laughing softly with friends and family. It was a sun-filled afternoon, the kind where the normal hum of the store almost felt comforting. But that afternoon, a conversation that was supposed to be a simple exchange over apples and oranges would become anything but ordinary. Near the produce section, an elderly woman, probably in her late 70s, stood adjusting her glasses as she reached for a bag of apples. Her posture was one of impatience, a soft muttering leaving her lips as she carefully selected her fruit. Her worn cardigan and the way her silver hair was neatly pinned painted the picture of an ordinary grandmother. Except for what would come next. A young black man, dressed in a blue hoodie and jeans, approached the produce stand. His name was Jamal, and he blended into the scene as any customer would, texting on his phone while balancing a small basket of groceries. He was focused, as most people were, unaware that the tone of his day was about to change drastically. The elderly woman turned abruptly as Jamal reached for a bag of oranges nearby. Her gaze shifted, and her expression changed quickly, becoming visibly more critical. Jamal could tell right away that something wasn't right, though he had no idea what she was about to say. "You people don't belong here," she spat, her voice harsh and loud enough for those nearby to hear. Jamal froze for a second, his fingers hovering over his phone. He looked up slowly, surprised. But the elderly woman wasn't finished. "Why don't you go back to Africa where you came from?" she continued, as though her words were a matter of fact. A couple of shoppers nearby stopped in their tracks. Some exchanged uncomfortable glances. Others pretended not to hear. The air grew thick and heavy, and the regular buzz of the store quieted. Jamal stood still, his eyes locked onto the elderly woman, unsure of what to do. A young mother quickly steered her child away. A man in the produce section glanced nervously at Jamal, and the tension in the store grew palpable. Everyone within earshot had stopped, frozen in place, uncertain whether to intervene, to stay silent, or to do something about what they had just heard. Jamal's mind raced, but his body remained calm, his brow furrowed, and for a moment it seemed as though he might react, perhaps lash out or respond with anger, but he didn't. Instead, he took a deep breath. His face remained unreadable, as though he was processing every possible way he could respond. The elderly woman held her ground, seemingly oblivious to the growing discomfort around her. Jamal shifted his basket to his other hand, his posture straightening. Slowly, the room began to focus on him, on the moment, on the tension that had gripped the air. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft, but with a firm clarity that carried through the now silent store. "Ma'am," he began, his tone calm but piercing. "Do you even realize what you just said?" The woman scoffed, her hands clutching her apples even tighter. "I said what I said," she snapped, almost daring him to argue. Jamal shook his head slightly, his gaze steady. "All right," he said, his voice deliberate and unyielding. "Since you brought it up, let's talk about that." For a moment, no one moved. It was as if the whole room was holding its breath, waiting for something, anything to break the silence. Jamal's words were measured and controlled, the weight of them heavy in the air. "You said I don't belong here," Jamal continued, now addressing not just the woman, but the growing crowd of onlookers. "Let me tell you a little bit about where I come from." He paused for effect, his eyes still locked on the elderly woman, whose expression had shifted slightly as she realized Jamal wasn't going to back down. "My great-great-grandfather was born in Mississippi," Jamal said. "He was a sharecropper, working land that he didn't own. He broke his back for a better life, for his children, for a chance at something more. His father? He was a slave, kidnapped, beaten, and sold as property." The woman's lips tightened, but she said nothing. The room around them seemed to lean in, every ear straining to hear. "He worked. He fought." Jamal continued. "He fought in a war. World War II. A war for a country that sent him overseas to risk his life, only to return and be treated like dirt. He couldn't sit at the same counters, drink from the same fountains. But you know what? He stayed. He stayed because he believed in the promise of this country, even when this country didn't believe in him. Jamal's words hit harder now. The silence around them was thick, but Jamal's voice held steady. My parents fought too, not with weapons or violence, but with their hands. Every day, they raised me to believe in kindness, in respect, and in hard work. My mom is a teacher. She spent her whole life helping kids, no matter their race. And my dad? He's a mechanic, the kind of guy who would stop to help anyone, anytime, anywhere, someone like you. If you broke down on the side of the road, the woman's face turned pale, her grip on her apples tightening as her gaze dropped to the floor. Jamal's voice softened, but it lost none of its strength. So, he said, his words deliberate, you're telling me I don't belong here? That I should go back to Africa? Jamal paused for a moment, the weight of his words settling into the room. I am as much a part of this country as you are, maybe even more, because my family has paid the price for it, in blood, sweat, and tears. The elderly woman opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her face flushed, and for a brief moment, she looked like she might say something in defense, but she stopped. Jamal took a step back, his posture still steady. He addressed the whole crowd now, his voice calm but filled with a quiet power. I could have walked away, he said, but what good would that have done? Ignorance doesn't get better with silence. It's up to all of us to be better than this, to be better than words like those. The silence in the room was deafening for a moment longer, but the stillness broke when a man near the deli counter started to clap. Slowly, a few more joined in. Then an older woman, near the frozen foods aisle, whispered, my dad fought in that same war. He always said the only color that mattered was the red on the flag. Soon, a young cashier at the register chimed in, her voice full of admiration. I've never seen anyone handle something like that so gracefully. Thank you. The elderly woman, now flustered, clutched her cart tightly. She didn't apologize, but her posture had changed. The fire in her eyes had dimmed. Jamal smiled faintly, his calm demeanor still intact. It's not about what you meant, he said gently. It's about how it came across. Words matter. Actions matter even more. The elderly woman, now looking around at the people who had witnessed the exchange, quietly turned her cart and made her way toward the exit. As she walked away, Jamal noticed a few people approaching him, offering quiet words of gratitude. One woman placed her hand on his shoulder and said, thank you for saying what needed to be said. Jamal nodded, his composure still strong. Sometimes, he said softly, almost to himself, it's not about winning or losing. It's about making sure people hear the truth,